Number 8, Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister and asks, why didn't he mention climate change yesterday when he outlined his government's priorities for the year in his statement to Parliament?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the statement to Parliament does not list everything the government intends to do in the year, and the overall structure of the government's emissions trading scheme going forward was well established last year.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Was the reason that he didn't talk about climate change in his statement for the year because addressing climate change is not a priority for his government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, no, that's not the reason. I mean, the government has some very clear top priorities, and climate change is an important issue. That's why we have an emissions trading scheme. That's why this year we'll have a binding emissions target. Well, actually, interestingly enough, let's just quote what Labor's increase in emissions was when they were in office. Oh, that's right, 23%, and under National they went down.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Was it more important to use his speech to talk about the Green Party 11 times, the Labor Party 23 times, to make a joke about putting a bell on David Cunliffe? Was it more important to do that rather than discuss the biggest threat facing the planet and how New Zealand could do its share?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, one of the biggest threats facing New Zealand could be a Labor Greens government. I mean, let's get it right. I mean, the Green Party policy, correct me if I'm wrong, is they support a target of between 25% and 40% reduction in global emissions by 2020. They would demand a huge increase in the emissions trading scheme and the cost on New Zealand families. Let's be up front, because let's have that debate when we're on TV, in those debates, talking about how the Green Party are going to force New Zealand consumers to pay a truckload more money every single week, and let's see whether they like it. If they do, good luck. He'll be Minister of Finance.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Well, then can the Prime Minister confirm that under his government he's proposing to put the costs onto taxpayers rather than consumers, and so taxpayers are subsidising greenhouse pollution, which is the exact opposite of those of us who believe in using market instruments to reduce greenhouse emissions, the exact opposite of what you should do?
The Right Honourable Prime
Speaker,
Minister.
no, I don't agree with that. And I go back to the fundamental point. If the member wants to see New Zealand with a much more significantly increased target, as he does, fair enough, that's their policy. Let's understand what that means. Much bigger costs for New Zealand consumers and New Zealand businesses. That means less jobs. That means New Zealand being less competitive, all the while the rest of the world is doing very little. If that's the member's policy, fair enough. That's why he wants to be Minister of Finance. But in the world that we live in over here, which is the real world, we don't support his view on climate change.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it his plan to subsidise polluting industries and hence lock in old investments rather than encouraging new investments? Is that plan consistent with his plan as a Prime Minister to put off all the hard issues because he'd rather make jokes than make tough calls?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
No.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Will he commit to accepting Pacific climate change refugees in light of comments from the President of Kiribati, who said, and I quote, "Climate change is eating away our children's future. For low-lying countries such as Kiribati, which are at the front line of climate change, the threat it poses is real and immediate." It is no joke, Prime Minister.
The Right Honourable
Mr.
Prime
Speaker,
Minister.
that's right, and that's why this government will have a firm binding target on the reduction on its long-term plan for reductions. That's why we have an emissions trading scheme. That's why we're investing in the Greenhouse Gas Alliance. But I go back to the point I made earlier. The member wants New Zealand to have an emissions trading scheme and a cost on its consumers way above everywhere else in the world. Fair enough. He wants New Zealand consumers to pay way more than the average American, way more than the average Australian, way more than the average Canadian, way more than actually people in Europe. Fair enough, but he should go into the election campaign and be honest with those New Zealand voters. Vote Greens, you pay a lot more money.
Question number 9, the Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.